Because it's interesting for me having a father of two daughters, and working as a Chinese medicine practitioner for 15 years. I didn't intend to specialize in women's health. It just so happened that 75% of my clients were women. And in Chinese medicine, like if you want to do a proper diagnosis, regardless of whether you're treating someone for headaches or gut problems, you got to ask about the menstrual cycle. So I found myself having conversations around menstrual cycles for 15 years. So yeah, it's my perspective is a little bit different before I moved into talking with blokes. But I think the real value I've got here is around having that conversation with men and why those conversations can be awkward and difficult.
I just want to thank you in advance for doing the emotional labor of introducing yourself and justifying why we're having this conversation, because that is exactly why we're having this conversation. And I really love that you serendipitously found yourself to be a woman whisperer, and it's great that we're here now. And yeah, I mean, obviously what I'm doing is trying to empower people through the lens of their cycle, to see it as a source of strength and power and pride and possibility and a tool for self-care. And it's all well and good to sort of learn those things in theory or even embody them, but if you can't have conversations about them with the people you work with and your friends and your kids and your partners, then it kind of can't really evolve. And what I hear often is that it's really exciting that I've learned this and that I'm more in tune with my body, but when I try and have a conversation with sorry, I thought that was Sarah messaging me to say that I'd done something wrong, but it was my father-in-law trying to have a conversation with me about his Wordle. So how do I open this thing again? Okay, here we go. Back to the job at hand. So yeah, people are telling me that they're having problems talking to their male non-cycling partners about this. And yeah, let's just fix this. Let's just have a conversation about how we can do that, because I think there's some real gold to be tapped. And I just feel like, I don't know what your experience is of this, but I feel like actually there's a lot of men who really want to have a conversation that's a different narrative.
Yeah, I think there's massive gold in there. And look, as a husband and a father of two menstruating young women, it's great to watch them taking your knowledge and other ways of gaining a better awareness of their cycle. But as a person who lives with other people who menstruate and has relationships with other people who menstruate, just the knowledge of the cycle is hugely valuable for me. And I just think there's billions of men out there who don't get a chance to actually understand what's going on there. I think everyone wins when non-menstruating people understand more about what the cycle is all about. So I think there's huge potential there.
Did you say millions or billions?
Billions. Well, how many non-menstruating people who will never have a menstrual cycle in the world? There's probably 4 billion of us,
Correct.
Yeah.
All right.
You're awesome. You're not just fine. You're awesome.
Thanks, Mikey.
That was
I've had a run. I'm day 9, and I was saying to Sarah that I was feeling a bit like I didn't quite set myself up that well this cycle. I sort of had a few things crash into my fantasy plans of rest and nurturing in my menstrual dream phase. And I feel like I'm still kind of paying for it. And then I feel like because I didn't kind of build up my energy, then I didn't really get into that physical exercising, pre-ovulatory kind of drivey vibe. And then I'm like, so anyway, I've been going for a walk and a run, and that is really helping to get things moving. So
love it.
That's where I am. Mikey, maybe do you want to share what day you are?
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting question, isn't it? Because I think regardless of gender, we all have a yearly cycle. I think everyone understands summer and spring and autumn and things I do every year at New Year to set myself up for the year. But I just think the rest of my life is just chaos. I'm quite a little bit jealous of this idea of being able to reset every month and have a think about where I'm at, cut off the dead wood, start my new ideas and launch out into the world. And I think there's this theory or expectation that women are cyclical and men are linear. Well, men might be linear, but that line is pretty curvy and chaotic in my experience. I think we're lying as men if we think we're consistent and reliable and these kind of things all the time. I think, I have up days and down days, and days where I'm productive and getting lots done, and days where I'm totally getting nothing done, and days where I'm loving and caring, where I'm in my give phase, and days where I'm in my take phase. So to answer your question, I reckon I'm in my dream phase. I'm kind of reassessing where things are at a little bit at the moment, partly because some things got cancelled with COVID and a few other opportunities popped up, and I'm like, I feel like I'm sitting by the fire in the depths of winter meditating, despite the fact it's 32 degrees today. So I feel like that's where I'm at. I'm dreaming about the future.
Well, that's gorgeous. I thought you were going to say I'm day 464,002.
Yeah.
And it's such a good point that, this idea that everyone has to be the same every single day and constantly show up in a consistent way. It's not real for anyone.
No.
We're all kind of trying to live up to this unrealistic fantasy of the linear, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, a lot of the time. Sometimes it does work. Sometimes it's a helpful structure to have. But there's there's a lot of people that struggle and a lot of blokes that struggle and don't get the help they need because they think they're supposed to be regular and consistent all of the time. And I think we can aspire to be as productive and efficient as we can, but I think it's also really useful to know that we're not going to be the best version of ourselves all the time, and sometimes we need a rest.
It's amazing the crossover, isn't it, between normalizing the cycle for people that have cycles, but then just normalizing having to, like you say, rest and self-care and kind of get off that treadmill of expectation for men, because that really hurts men. I mean, that's the work that you're doing to help with. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about why it was relevant to be having a conversation here, and I make a living out of getting blokes to talk about stuff that people assume that they don't want to talk about. And what I notice is that when we have those conversations, men and young blokes absolutely love those conversations. So this idea that blokes don't want to talk about their feelings, don't want to talk about relationships, don't want to talk about periods, I think there's a truth in it, but I think it's largely this veneer, this mask that we put on. I don't need to talk about that. I'm totally fine all the time. And that mask is built on this fear of not being seen as capable and competent and in control and knowledgeable and all of these things. I've gotten lost. I don't know. I don't know.
No, it's a perfect place to land. It's it's kind of, I mean, am I allowed to say it's the patriarchy? It's kind of, it's that bind, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think patriarchy, from my perspective, convinces blokes that you're not allowed to show any form of weakness, any form of vulnerability, to ask for help, to rely on others. And I think that makes blokes really out of touch with who they are and what they need and what their feelings are. And it makes them super out of touch with really feminine things like periods.
Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head with where the convergence is, and it's helping people to get in touch with their feelings and their bodies and to just actually tune in. And I guess when we all do that, then we all have a greater capacity to hold that space for each other. And then we've got world peace, kumbaya, and we don't have a job anymore. Fantastic.
Our work is done.
Let's just hope we can do it in the next 8 years before the world ends.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so where do you want to start? I mean, we could talk about periods just generally straight up, because I feel like for most people that's probably where they're starting, and then maybe we can have a bit more of a deep dive into the excuse me, cycle as a whole.
Yep.
Yeah, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I'm happy for you to drive it. I mean, I can quite easily talk for a long time.
Well, you've got a lot of great things to say. I mean, I guess like one thing that just comes to mind straight away is, when we were doing the mother-son camp, and you invited all of the boys to ask questions, anonymous questions, about what they wanted to know about the experience of women and their mothers in particular, and other people's mothers. And do you remember the conversation around, and I remember seeing their faces and just thinking, at that age, I guess most of them were sort of 14, 15. There was just this really open curiosity. And I guess, at that age, with school and all the kind of, social forces around them, you've already kind of learnt the narrative of, periods are gross and people that are premenstrual are psycho, and that's the only kind of way I can engage with this topic. But when it was done in this way that, I mean, we'd obviously set up a vibe over a day and a half, and it was really safe, and it was really connected and really supported, and confidential, obviously. But yeah, there was this just really open curiosity and wonder, and it was such a profound experience for me to have that conversation, witnessed by all of these other mothers with these beautiful teenage boys who, maybe some of that will stay with them, maybe it won't all stay with them, but just to make that space. And I think that's really precious, and that's what you do, is make the space so you can have the conversation. And maybe that's sort of something that we should be talking about as well, because I guess that's where people really struggle, is like, how do I even start? And most people sorry, a lot of people that I've spoken with, they have an experience, maybe it's from when they were younger, of someone outright shaming them, or saying, oh, that's gross, or and then that kind of lives in you, as part of your story and how you connect to people with that part of your body and part of your life. And so I don't know, how would you broach that? How might someone broach that as an adult, because obviously we've all got backstories, and you don't want to kind of bring that to every single adult interaction. And
all of us.
But relationships are a great place to kind of do some good mending, when you're really taking care of each other. So what do you reckon?
Yeah, so look, firstly, I would say that my experience is that when we create that carefully crafted space, I think everyone I've come across wants to have this conversation, this idea that blokes don't want to talk about stuff, young men don't want to be talking about this sort of stuff, is absolute garbage. When we actually create this, you've been there, it's this confidential space on our camps, but it's more of it's a space where we're out of the everyday, where we can drop our normal modes of reacting. Like if I walk onto a school bus and I say periods, like all of the boys will go, oh, gross. But if I actually take those boys aside and say, hey, fellas, we're going to have a really important conversation here. Let's talk about periods. Like even just doing that will produce a radically different response. So for me, what I think we want here is a different kind of a conversation where we can drop our automated ways of responding. And the most important way, the simplest way I think we can do that is to remove distractions and talk about why it's important. So if you've got a bloke or a young bloke in your life that you want to talk to about your period or your cycle or anything important, if you say, let's put our phones away, I've got something really important I want to talk to you about. That is, you're 80% of the way there, just in naming the intention, having the courage to say, this is actually important to me, and I need us to not have our phone switched on, or I need us to not be standing next to the highway, or I need us not to have 3 kids running around our feet. I need us to go to a place where it feels, not distracted, and to say, hey, I need your help with this. And speaking in blokes' language can be useful, particularly with young blokes. If I'm having a rough day and I'm facilitating a thing with some young blokes, I don't say, oh, fellas, I'm experiencing some sadness and I need extra support from you today. I don't say that. I say, fellas, I'm having a really rough day. I really want you to have my back here. And if I say it like that, you'll just notice their attention will just be on, because everyone knows what having a bad day is like, right?
Yeah.
And I'm asking for support, but I'm not saying, oh, I just need your emotional support here, fellas, because I'm having a rough day. Instead of that, if I could say, just get around me, fellas, because I'm really struggling this morning. I need you to focus. That will get a totally different response.
I love that. And I also love the suggestion of leading with, put our phones away, create a space, create an intention, but also I need to talk to you about something that is important to me. So I'm not leading with, hey, you didn't support me in this XYZ way on this day and that day and this day, but I'm just like, I'm starting with, this is really precious to me. This is like, I mean, it is me. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's in me, and I want to share this with you. And can we make some time to have this conversation? And I'm just wondering, like, because I hear all of this and I experience this as well, this idea that men don't want to talk about it, but actually so many men do, but also some don't. And I feel like, when someone says to me, particularly if they're a younger person and they're like, my partner just does not want to know, doesn't want to have the conversation, there's part of me that's like, dump him. Because I'm like, well, is that maybe an indicator of a situation where something, it could be anything, is important to me, it's precious to me, I want to share it with you, and I'm not being met and not being heard, and there's not even a sort of willingness to kind of walk through the door? I mean, if that's where you're at.
That's my response too. It's like, if there's something that's super important to me and my partner doesn't want to talk about it, I don't know if I want to spend heaps of time with that person. So whether it's my period or my ADHD or my passion for ukuleles, if there's something I really need to talk to someone about and the closest person in my life just says, nah, then you've got to make a decision. Like, do I want to have a life where I can't talk to this person about this?
Yeah.
Or need to find a different person.
I'm really glad we got there, because I feel like, I obviously love talking about the period and educating anyone who'll listen. But at some point, I think in a relationship, your job isn't necessarily to be an educator / social worker / do you know what I mean? And I think there's a lot of people who are sort of trying to do that work and trying to get their partner on board. And I just think it's nice to have that as a disclaimer, that, like, if someone is completely unwilling, it's not something that you're doing wrong. It's not the way that you're coming to the conversation, or the way that you aren't turning yourself into a pretzel to deliver that information in the most palatable, non-confrontational way. Maybe that person actually doesn't, have the capacity to meet you, and that's okay, but there are other people who do. Or
I think it's also worth unpacking the unwillingness, because in my experience, when we create these spaces through our conversations, pretty much everyone is on board. And, you could say 99%, because 1% of the population apparently are narcissists. Those people are going to be really difficult. It's difficult to get them to have a sense of empathy for you, but that's 1% of the population. 99% of the population actually care about how their partner feels. But I think with a lot of men, they've built up this really strong veneer of, I don't talk about hard stuff. I don't talk about difficult stuff. I don't talk about feminine things like flowers and dancing and silk, the things that we don't label as traditionally masculine.
Yeah.
So part of it is I think I know the vast majority of men from my work and from studies feel this pressure to be a certain way as a man has shaped who we are as blokes, and that gets in the way of us having those conversations. So I think when there's resistance, when your partner's like, oh, that's gross, what he's saying is, I actually don't know about that stuff. I don't know how to have that conversation. That's been labeled as something that's not for me, and I don't understand it. And so for him to lean into that conversation takes vulnerability, takes admitting that he doesn't have the answers, that he's not the boss, that he's not in control. And that takes a degree of courage. So yes, I would encourage all menstruating people to find, if you want to be in a relationship with a man, find men who have the courage to have those conversations. But also acknowledge the amount of fear and shame that men have around being in those vulnerable spaces where they don't have the answers and they're not the boss and they're not the alpha. So you've got to support blokes to feel comfortable in having those conversations. I think that's it too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I guess once you're able to have those conversations, you're then setting a precedent for this is how we take care of each other. This is how we take care of our feelings. This is how we take care of precious things to each other. And, you know, like sometimes people message me and they tell me about the ways that their partner cares for them through their cycle and tracks their cycle better than they do and knows exactly when to run them a bath and pop in with a glass of wine and washes their pads for them. And like, honestly, it goes on. And I'm just like, where are these people, these unicorns? Like, amazing, you know? And I think people assume that I must have this partner who is just living and breathing, you know, my entire cycle. Quite often Richard has no idea what day I'm on. Like, he's an Aquarian. He's you know, but what he's really good at is when I say to him, hey, I'm day this, I really need that, can you help me with this? He'll meet me. And I really feel like over the years that we've been doing that, he is getting better. And I shouldn't speak for him, and maybe I should have a conversation with him, but I feel like he's definitely becoming more open with me and more explicit about what he needs and asking directly for what he's trying to, you know, scaffold for himself. And yeah, I mean, whatever brings you closer together is incredible, right? So I think it's like people get so hung up on the period part and the blood part, but actually it's just another avenue for connection and for closeness. And that's
go on.
I was just going to look for a clumsy way to land. I was just drifting in that utopian possibility of togetherness and connection. So
I think one of the important things that stands out to me there is that people, like blokes, people who don't menstruate, typically are really curious about what it's like. And I think we sometimes get caught up in terms of education on telling them the facts. Like, I don't think really
same for girls, you know, or you know, like it's like, yeah, it's all about the management. It's all about here's how you use a period, a tampon and a pad, and
how many milliliters of blood and how often you want to change your pads. Like, what blokes want to know is, what is the experience like for you? How does it feel? What do you need? And you'll know, if you refer back to those mother-son camp questions, they're all about what's it like having a period? What's it like having sex, being a girl? What's, you know, they want to know what the experience is. What's it like being a mum? What's it like being a sister? They don't want to know the facts. And so if we want to have great conversations, and I know this is, you know, putting pressure on women to fix the problem, but we as men need to be curious and need to listen. And I think we need to hear experiences and stories. So we need that level of honesty and potentially vulnerability from women as well, because if I've never had a period, and I haven't, I'm not going to understand what it's like by learning the facts. I need to actually hear the stories and the experiences. It's a bit like when we've talked about consent education, like knowing the facts is only going to go so far to change people's behavior. Whereas if we know what other people feel like and what their experiences are, then we get it at a whole different kind of a level. So, you know, I was talking earlier about how do we have that conversation? We'll create that space where we're free from distractions, talk about why it's important. And then the next thing is actually be honest with what your experience is. Share your experiences rather than the data and the information, because that is, I think, what blokes need to understand what it's like. And the side bonus is they're less likely to get distracted by this grossness of, oh, we're talking about blood. We're not talking about blood. We're talking about how it feels, what the impact is, and how I need to change my behavior and how it affects my work and my relationships and all my other stuff. So I think that's important as well. And the other thing there is to be curious. Once you've, you know, sat down for an important conversation and shared some of your stuff, I think it's really important to try to be as curious as we can. Like, what would you like to understand better? What do you get confused with? What's your experience of it? And because blokes tell me things like, I just feel like I have to hide for 1 week of the month, or and I don't think anyone wants that. I think it's worthwhile being really curious. Like, ask blokes questions. How is it for you? What's your experience of it? What do you struggle with?
You mean me as a cycling person ask a guy as a non-cycling person, what is your experience of me as a cycling person?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think the other thing is here for men, like, it's the same advice for blokes. If you want to have a conversation with someone in your life who is menstruating, do the same thing. Say, hey, this is important to me. Let's go where we're not distracted. I want to ask you. And then this is what I'm struggling with. I don't know how to support you when your period's coming. I don't know how to support you when your period's heavy. I don't know how to support you when you've got this pain. Like, how can I, you know, really have your back here? I keep going that same way. I think as men, I think we really need to be curious, and that doesn't come from reading facts online. Like that's a piece of the puzzle. But I think we really want to hear the stories of menstruating people in our lives to know what it's like. Curiosity is a superpower here, I reckon.
I think you're absolutely right. And I just feel like, yeah, we could sort of explore that more. Because that's really, I think, where most people are at. You know, they're probably not looking to kind of have in-depth conversations about every single phase of their cycle. I mean, some people are, and some men are really willing to get on board with that and you know, notice the rhythm and how it you know, can both benefit them and benefit them to care for their partner in certain ways. But yeah, I love that. Just starting with some intentional conversations, being curious, excuse me, being curious with each other about how that experience of you being cyclical affects, you know, the dynamics of your relationship.
I think it's worth acknowledging that curiosity for men actually takes a degree of vulnerability. It takes admitting that I don't have the answers and I don't know how to perfectly please you as a woman and a partner. That for some men can be a vulnerable space. That's the work I think we have to do as men, is lean into not knowing and not having the answer and just choosing to ask questions instead.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of speaks to that paradigm, doesn't it, of, you know, and I know I'm generalizing here, but women just wanting to be heard or wanting to kind of air whatever's going on, and then men feeling like they need to fix it. But if you have that sort of thing of, I need to fix it and I need to know everything, but I've got no idea what you're talking about, or no embodied experience of what that feels like, then yeah, that's very clunky. That's going to lead to a problem, especially maybe if you're trying to bring up that conversation when you're premenstrual AF and you're in the take phase and you're just like, you know, rearranging things in the dishwasher because you don't like how they're done or something. Not that I'm doing it like that, but
when someone is drowning is not the time to teach them how to swim. So, you know, maybe choose the time. Maybe I want to have an important conversation. Can we chat on Wednesday night? Or, you know, set
make
it up
some
for
time.
when we're both, and both of us, you know, if my partner is FIFO and he's just come back from a 7-day shift, maybe I don't want to have that conversation the minute he walks back in the door. Maybe I want to pick a time that works for him, works for me, and we're actually all on the same page.
Yep. I
Because
feel
that
like
gets us.
No, you go.
I was going to say that gets us past that veneer. I was talking about how this expectation that blokes don't want to talk about periods and women's stuff. And that, I think we build up that as a protection mechanism. Oh, that's gross. That's girly. That's not for me, because it protects us from this feeling of not having the answers, not being clear. But I think the fact is that blokes want deeper connection, and they want to understand, and they want better relationships. We just have to get better at letting go of those masks that we put up that get in the way of deeper conversations.
And, you know, I'm just, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, you know, like we did at the mother-son camp, having those conversations with, you know, young men, 13, 14, 15 is like, it's, and I think you can go even younger. I mean, having these conversations with your kids when they're little about, you know, and it's such a cycle, isn't it? It's like, you know, the way that you parent and the way that you partner and the legacy that you create for the next generation. And I think it's really incredible how far we've come, even in the last sort of 5-10 years. And I look at, you know, the young men in my life who obviously know a lot about periods because they know me. And I'm just thinking like, wow, what are your relationships going to be like? What is the future going to look like for your partners, for your children, you know? And that's really exciting to me, because I think that's when we can really all reach this next level of connection and relationship to ourselves and to each other and to the earth.
Yeah, we need to get on the same page. We need to hear each other's stories. Men need to hear what it's like being a woman. And hopefully women can hear more of what it's like. What's that pressure like being a man, trying to be man enough? And for folks who don't fit that gender binary as well, like we need to hear from people to know what their experiences are like. And I think the big thing, for the most important thing here for me, is that blokes really want deeper connections. They want better relationships. They actually want to have great conversations around this sort of stuff. We just have to support them to step out of that fear of stepping into the mystery of not having the answers and not knowing what to do.
Mikey, this has been a really fantastic chat, and I feel like there are definitely going to be more. And I want to thank you for your time and your energy and all of the great things that you do with Good Blokes Co. And I want to finish by asking you, I've already asked you what day you're on. You told me that you're metaphorically sort of somewhere in the dream phase. And so I'm going to ask you, what do you need and how are you going to best use your power today?
That's a great question. I need to intentionally carve out some time to spend with my journal, to do some journaling, which means I need to set some good boundaries around when I'm finishing work and moving into or the admin style of my part of my day and moving into a bit of time with the journal. So yeah, for me to really make the most out of that, I need to make it a priority, make it important, set a boundary. Thanks for that.
So you're gonna, no problem. And so you're gonna channel that power, that, you know, being reflective and dreamy by actually just reflecting and being with yourself.
Write some stuff down, draw some pictures, have a think. Thanks for having me. This was a great chat.
It was a good chat, wasn't it?
Yeah, good vibes.
Thanks, Mikey.
Love it, Lucy.
Hi, my name's Lucy Peach. Welcome to this course, which is called Meet Your Power, in which you will meet your power. To be precise, you will meet your powers. because your menstrual cycle is so much more than just having a period or being premenstrual or knowing that you kind of ovulate somewhere around the middle. You actually have these 4 distinct hormonal phases. And every time you have a period or a menstrual cycle, you have an opportunity to get to know yourself through these phases. And if you have a menstrual cycle, chances are you're going to have about 450 of them. So I'm going to walk you through it. We're going to learn about each of the 4 phases, and you're really going to have an opportunity to understand your cycle and to harness it.